I hope that all of you have a good lunch break. So now we should ground it ourselves. So it's a good topic to continue. I will shortly present our presenters for this part. Thomas Rihacek, right?
It's fine.
It's fine. And Jan Rubal. Both of them are from Czech Republic, University of Brno. And there is a Center for Psychotherapy Research at the University of Brno. And they will present the grounded theory method, principles, and applications. So let us begin and enjoy grounding.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm afraid I have introduced myself as an expert on statistics, which is very far from true. So, but I know something about the grounded theory method, and so that's why me and Jan will present this in the afternoon. The presentation, does it work? Can you hear me? No? This is better? Okay. Okay. I'll try not to move too much. The presentation will consist of some theoretical slides about the method, and we will also show you a real-life example of research which has been done by Jan primarily, and I have assisted him a bit. You may have found handouts on your seats, but in the morning, not now perhaps, but you may have them still. They belong to our presentation. And if you have them, you can find some notes about the method on one side of the sheet, and the other side contains a transcript of a research interview which we hopefully use during the presentation to show you something. Or if you don't have it printed, you may have downloaded the handout, so maybe you have it on your computer or tablet. So now we switch our attention from quantitative methods, which were the focus of the previous lecture, to qualitative methods. There are many kinds of qualitative methods, and the grounded theory method is one of them, one which is probably the best known and most often used, not only in psychology and psychotherapy, but also in other fields of study. It's first note, it's a complex method. It's not just a way how to analyze your data. It's a complex method which includes also data creation, sampling strategy, and analysis. It's a method which aims to build a theory. That's why it's called grounded theory. It aims to build a theory of a phenomenon in a systematic and reflexive manner. And the way how the theory is built is induction, inductive way, data-driven way. You may ask, why should we bother about theories? Don't we have enough theories already in psychotherapy and psychology? I would like to give you an answer with an example. I will tell you a few information about our research I have done with my colleague or student, and we have published it recently, but in Czech. It was a very small research. And she asked, when and how is a therapist's self-disclosure helpful in the therapeutic process? By self-disclosure, we mean when the situation when therapists reveal something personal about themselves, not just sharing their emotions or this is the self-revealing statements, which which can be understood as a broader definition of self-disclosure, but we mean the more narrow definition. So this is what we asked. We had a very small sample. We had 5 pairs of therapists and clients. The clients were 5 women, therapists were a more mixed sample, more 3 women, 2 men. And the criterion for inclusion in the sample was that the client has experienced a therapist's self-disclosure. So we asked the clients if they did experience, and if they answered yes, then we asked their therapist if they both can participate in the research, and we did interviews with both of them separately. And we identified a set of self-disclosure events which we analyzed, and we arrived at a kind of theory. And you can see this is quite a typical example of a result of this method. You can see a central concept in the middle which explains why or when the self-disclosure works positively or negatively. It says that the self-disclosure works positively if it fits the client's needs in the therapeutic process. And the needs of all the clients in our sample, in all the events which we analyzed, was a need of being confirmed by the therapist. So if the therapist's self-disclosure fits this need of a client, then there can be some positive effects of this self-disclosure. We also asked what motivates therapists to disclose themselves, and we have found 2 groups of motives. One group was personal motives, which therapists wanted to relieve their own tension, or they wanted to make themselves transparent in the process, or they were motivated by just considering the impact on client. They wanted to express sympathy, they wanted to provide emotional support, and so on. If the therapists considered impact on client and planned their intervention with this consideration in head, then the impact was positive, and was positive in 3 aspects. It positively affected alliance, it positively affected the client's experiencing, and sometimes it also caused a shift in the client's problem. But in cases when therapists did not think about their clients but just about themselves and their own needs, it was felt as a burden by the client. Just the clients asked themselves, why should I listen to this? What should I do with that? What am I expected to do? And it distracted their attention. It was a negative effect of the self-disclosure. So this is a basic theory of how self-disclosure works, and it serves as a kind of map. When we as therapists have this kind of map, we can better decide about whether it's good to self-disclose or not. Of course, this is not a complete theory. We would need a much bigger sample to arrive at more conclusive results, but it's a first map. So this is why we need theories. They provide us with concepts. Concepts are just means thanks to which we can speak about phenomena. So it gives us some vocabulary. We can speak, we can talk with other therapists about self-disclosure in these terms. Theories give us explanation of behavior and experience. So it answers the question, why do the clients experience therapist self-disclosure this or that way? When we know why, we can also predict what happens if we decide this way or that way, and at least partially we have some control over the situation. And it also produces testable hypotheses which means we can use them for following quantitative research and test whether the theory is correct or is useful. We as Gestalt therapists love Kurt Lewin, so I put here Kurt Levin's words, but I'm sure you know them, all of you. Grounded theory method was founded by two fathers. This is interesting. Was conceived and born by two fathers, Barney Glaser and Anselm Strauss. They were sociologists, and they devised the method for sociology, for generating theory in sociology. But the method was adopted by other disciplines, and it's used really in many disciplines. They conducted research which was published in 1965. It was a research on dying, and they came out with a central category, awareness of dying, which they described in their book published in 1965. And when they did this, they were asked by their colleagues, how did you come to this category or these results? So they sat and wrote another book, which was published 2 years later. You perhaps cannot see it, I'm afraid. The title of the book was The Discovery of Grounded Theory, and they described the methodological background of their research. And this was the first methodological publication on the grounded theory method. Since that time, and grounded theory developed in many directions. It has many modifications now. Strauss and Glaser are sort of divorced. They didn't like each other, and they developed their own versions of the method. And there are also many other versions. The Glazers, the Strauss, and also the Charmazian, which is here, are considered the three main important approaches. We will not focus on the differences of the method. We will rather present what's similar between them. But if we have enough time at the end, and if you are interested, we can present also some differences or specialties. In this slide, I will present the grounded theory method in a nutshell. It's just one slide, and then we will develop the phases in the subsequent slides. As in every research, we have to start with a research question. We have to ask something, otherwise we have no reason to do research. So we identify our problem, we ask our question, and with this question in mind, we start collecting data. And of course, creating our sample, which is connected to each other. You can see the process is circular. Once you collect your data, they can inform you whether your initial question was right or whether it could be put in another way, which would be more precise or more productive. So the research is like a circle, and the later stages influence the previous stages. So it's not linear model. It's like moving in this way still. So we create our data, and we may modify our questions. And once we have our data, we start analyzing. The analytical stage can be called concept development. This is the core of the analysis. We develop concepts. We develop ways of speaking about what we research. This is concepts. And once we have a set of concepts, we start to look for connections among the concepts, for theoretical relationships, how they are related together. And the last stage of analysis is choosing one category or one concept as a central concept and connecting all other categories to this central concept and formulating a theory. So you have seen here on this slide there is one central category and the other categories are connected with this central category. The role of the research question is to identify the phenomenon under study. It delineates our focus of interest. It tells us what to focus on and what could be put aside. We usually start with a broad or wide question because at the beginning we do not know about the phenomenon. Otherwise we would choose some other way to study it. If we knew what's going on, then we can use some questionnaires or measures. But if we don't know, then our questions are very broad, sometimes stupid, and they become more specific in the course of the research process. In the grounded theory method, the research question is often focused on process or on some kind of action, social action, psychological action, but some kind of action. Research questions should be formulated in contact with the field. It's better if you know the field, if you are psychotherapists and formulate questions about psychotherapy because you know what you need to know about psychotherapy and what would be practical to know about psychotherapy. Otherwise, we may end up with some theory which is just academic but has no use in practice. And the question definitely should be interesting for the researchers themselves, because qualitative research requires a lot of energy, a lot of time. It's really exhausting activity, and you need to be enthusiastic about the question you want to study. I can describe how we arrived at the question about the self-disclosure. The student came to me and she asked me, well, I'm thinking about just researching some boundaries in psychotherapy. Boundaries in psychotherapy. And I asked her, what do you mean by boundaries in psychotherapy? And we just realized it means too many things. It's a really vague concept. So what she did was she interviewed two psychotherapists. It was just pilot interviews. What they think about boundaries in psychotherapy and what they would be interested in if they studied boundaries in psychotherapy. And they described several topics, and one of them was self-disclosure. So it was a topic formulated by the therapists. She took it and she did the research on it. This is the question which will be with us here in the second part of the workshop, and we will show you Jan's research, which answers this question. Research question is very important. I think of it as of a perspective, which is here from the very beginning till the very end. It informs our interview questions. It influences what kind of data we get. And when we have this kind of data, it influences what we see in data, what kind of concepts we create. If we have the same data, but we ask different questions or use different methods, we arrive at completely different results. And the theory is nothing more than an answer to the question. So question is at the beginning and question is at the end. Even though it might be a different question at the end. but that's a good result of the research. Where do we take questions? One source of question is personal and professional experience. It's clear. The other source is gaps in literature. We read theoretical books or empirical articles and we find out that there is something missing, there is a gap, and we want to fill it. So this may be empirical or theoretical reasons for conducting research. But there is also a concept which I like very much. It's a sensitizing concept. It's a kind of very broad concept which serves as a perspective and which influences the way we look at reality or at data, and it influences the results we get. It's very difficult to explain it theoretically, so I will show it on an example. I have read a very interesting study which was done on adolescents in psychotherapy, and it asked how adolescents experience being assessed, being diagnosed in psychotherapy. It was not conducted by a grounded theory method, but by thematic analysis, but it's not important here. What I want to tell you that the interview structure was informed by Bourdieu's concept of therapeutic alliance. I don't know if you are familiar with this concept. It's quite well known in the research world. I'm not sure if in practice, but the theoretical concepts defines therapeutic alliance by three components. Agreement on goals, so the therapist and the client should agree on their goals. Agreement on tasks. Tasks are the ways to the goals. And emotional bond between the client and the therapist. So these researchers knew this concept and they structured the interview to cover all these areas. So this is an example how an already existing concept might influence our research. So we do not always design our research from scratch. We sometimes start in the middle of something and continue. And we have also another example which is from Jan's research, so he will tell you a bit about his sensitizing concept.
As Tomasz has said, our question was how therapists experience working with depressive clients. And when I was asking myself this question, I already had in mind the Gestalt theory and Gestalt theory of depression and of depressive experience. So I had my kind of sensitizing concept was the Gestalt theory of co-creation of the here and now, and specifically the depression as being constructed together in the relationship, that this is the suffering of the relationship. This kind of theory is described in our book about Gestalt therapy in clinical practice. So this is kind of a concept I had in mind asking this question, and it made me sensitive to some aspects of the therapeutic relationship.
Okay. The next step is data creation. We are used to say data creation rather than data collection in qualitative research because we are aware that we actively co-create the data. Most qualitative research relies on semi-structured interviews, though you can use observation or you can analyze diaries or whatever kind of text. But most research uses semi-structured interviews. When you design your interview structure, it's good to first to try to create from 2 to 4 partial research questions. That means questions which directly follow from your main research question, but which are more specific. And then if you have this set of partial research questions, then you can start to formulate questions for the interview, which cover these research questions. Again, we have an example. This example comes from the research on the self-disclosure. In the left column, you can see the research questions, the partial research questions, which asks about the therapist side of the process. And on the right side, in the right column, you can see the interview questions which were given to the therapists. So as researchers, we asked, what does the decision-making process before self-disclosure look like? And the questions we ask are like, under what kind of circumstances do you begin to consider revealing something personal about yourself? Or what led you to reveal this personal information in this particular case? Yeah. The second research question was formulated as, how do therapists disclose themselves? This is a general question, and the questions in interview were more specific. How did you actually convey the information to your client? Why or how did you choose this particular way? And the third example of a research question was, how, if at all, do therapists evaluate the effect of self-disclosure on the process or on the client? And again, we asked the therapists, how do you think it influenced the process? Or what kinds of the client's reaction or behavior did you make think this? So you can see that the research questions are formulated in a different way than the questions for interview. The research questions usually are very conceptually dense. They are meant for us. They focus our attention. They structure our thinking about the phenomenon. We usually do not ask them directly in the interview. In the interview, we try to ask simple questions. We try to look for different ways of asking about the same subject. And if possible, I find this quite important, if possible, we refrain from using professional vocabulary. Like, I would never say self-disclosure in such an interview because it's a professional term. And I'm not sure whether therapists would understand, and if they did, whether their concept of self-disclosure would be the same as mine. So if they used the concept self-disclosure, then I would ask them what they mean by this. But I would never ask directly about self-disclosure. I would say disclose personal information or reveal personal information and so on. And we have another example which is again based on Jan's research.
So I was interested in the experience of therapists. So the research question that I asked to myself is how is the experience of therapists evolving in time during the therapy session? This was my partial question. And the way I asked therapists were try to think about a particular session with a depressive client and tell me what you experienced during this session and what did you do in that particular moment you're describing. Did you feel something in your body too? And what did you think also? Not only feel, but also what did you think? And how did your experience evolve in time? How did it change? What did happen afterwards? These questions are very well known to us. These are questions we use in therapy. So it was very natural for me to explore the experience of therapists. Then the second question, the partial research question I had, was how the therapists were handling, how they were coping with their own experiences, what they did with them. So I asked them, what did you do when they said, for example, I well, in that moment, I became very angry. So I asked him, and what did you do in that moment? And what happened afterwards? So how did you experience it after? So I was just following the process and kind of tracking the changes of their experiences.
One Czech psychoanalyst once told me that we think in psychoanalytical terms, but with clients or with analysts, we speak ordinary Czech. So this is the same in research. We think in research terms, but with our participants, we speak ordinary Czech, English, whatever. We do not want to spend more time on data creation. I would like to refer you on this book by Kathy Charmas, which is a really beautiful book on grounded theory. It has a second edition. I don't have the second edition, but I know it just exists, so it's here on the slide. And she has beautiful hints on how to create your interview structure and how to conduct your interview. Now we move to analysis. As I have already said, analysis can be thought of as concept development, developing concept. If I stick to grounded theory terminology, then I would say this is the open coding phase. I don't like the grounded theory terminology, so I have developed my own, which I hope is more comprehensible. The aim of this phase is to conceptualize the information contained in our data, which means we create concepts that represent our data in a way which is more abstract, which is more dense. And the concepts are grounded in the data. That's why the theory is called grounded theory. They are grounded, and this groundedness can be demonstrated by showing the direct quotations of data. This is quite an abstract way to speak about it, and I have tried to broke the process in several practical steps. First step is looking for what we call meaning units. A meaning unit is a piece of text which contains an information which is relevant to our research question. So it's like if you underline one sentence in the transcript, it can be your meaning unit. Once we have identified a meaning unit, we assign a code to this meaning unit. So we create a kind of label. We give it a name, simply spoken. And then we strive to develop the conceptual content of this code by making analytical notes. And there is again an example. This is an example from Jan's research, and you have this piece of transcript in your handouts. I will speak about the methodological process, and Jan will comment on it about the content of it. So we have identified a meaning unit. We can just underline it in the text. Yeah. The second step is assigning a code. So Jan assigned a code frustration. And then he tried to develop the content, the analytical content of the code, by describing what frustration means.
Yeah, so you can see the therapist, when describing her experiences, said it didn't work, like her effort to make the client happy or something. It didn't work. So I asked her, and what happened when you tried it this way? And she said, it was like in a garden. One is looking forward, and then it rains, and the strawberries get rotten anyway. It was like nothing matters and nothing works. So this is what she said. and the label, the code I put there was frustration, and my conceptual thinking about it was that the therapist in that moment was polarized against the client. He tried to supply the client with optimism, and he was searching for positive resources, he was looking for motivation, and but the effect what he wanted to come to was not curing, and the therapist felt frustrated. So this was one note, and the second note was that the experience that followed this frustration was nothing matters, nothing works, which is a different experience. It's more like helplessness, or like I'm losing my English. To just let it go. It's not no way. Like hopeless. So it seems that the therapist was sharing the experience with the client, with the feeling of hopelessness, helplessness. Nothing matters. It's a feeling of depressive client. So this was my comment. That first frustration, and then like being polarized from the therapist, from the client, and then being helpless, like sharing the experience with the client.
So from the methodological point of view, what we try to do when we develop the conceptual content, we summarize the meaning unit in our own words, in our analytical words. We can also add our own comments, our impressions, our hypotheses, which may be even less grounded in data, but which may be important because they kind of inform our research process. And we can also make notes on the relationships between the concepts which we create. So this is a way how to show it in a presentation, but in reality we have to do it in some practical way. Some people who don't like computers print out the text. They put the paper in landscape mode, and they print a column of the text with white margins, and they use the margins to make the notes. I prefer to use computer. You can use Microsoft Word and the comments function. So you just highlight the meaning unit and create a comment. Then you write down the name of the code, the label, and then the comment itself. It's sometimes called memo in the grounded theory terminology. Grounded theory has invented many peculiar terms. So memo. Or you can use specialized software. There are, I think, like 50 different kinds of software for qualitative analysis. Not all of them are suitable for grounded theory, but this one is especially good for grounded theory analysis. It's called Atlas. And if you look at it, it looks pretty much like the Word and its comments. You highlight the meaning unit, you create a code, and then you can open the code and fill in the description of the code. And the beauty of the software is that you can use the code as many times as you wish, and you can always, from any place in the document, you can reach the content of the code, and you can reach all quotations which are coded with this code. So this was a kind of advertisement for software. I have no money for this. It's not such a good deal, but it has some useful functions. Students, when I teach about grounded theory, students ask me what's the difference between a code and a concept or a category. and I began to explain it with the metaphor of a box. Yeah, the box is the concept. You can add a label on the box. This is the code. This is the name of the concept. This is the way how we speak about the concept, and we have to. It has to have a name. Otherwise, we would not be able to use it. And the name is something we use to take it, to grasp it, to move it, to manipulate with it mentally. But you can open the box and see what's inside. And the content of the box is very, very important. So students, when they begin analyzing using grounded theory method, they think it's just assigning codes. But analysis is not assigning codes. Analysis is about the development of the content of the codes. So this box in the right side has, you can see it has inner structure. The codes can have inner structure. And these boxes or concepts then become building blocks of the emerging theory. So the way we pile them up is the way of creating a theory. As I said, we not only need good labels, but we first of all need good content, interesting content or tasty content. It can be like this or like this. I love the last one most. So this is a code rich in content. Sometimes you can find labels like this on boxes. So this is not the way we should deal with our concepts, but this is the way we should use. If you are afraid and don't allow yourself to break your codes or concepts, then you will never be able to formulate a good theory. So the creation of a theory is always about reformulating the concepts again and again and again.
We spent several months just reformulating the concept now, so this is why Tomáš was indicating to me.
There are several ways how we can find a suitable name for our concept. The first way is just to create a name. The researcher creates a name because he or she knows best how to call the content of the concept. Or you can use some words from the participants if they are more suitable than your words. Or you can use even existing professional terms, but there is always a danger because these concepts are already defined, and you usually use them in a bit different way. So there is a danger. But you can do it. And we sometimes do it. As I said at the beginning, this phase is called open coding. Open means that you are open to creation of new and new codes, and you adopt a non-judgmental approach like we do in Gestalt therapy, and we do not decide at this phase which concepts are important and which are not. We wait until later phases, but we cannot do this forever. We cannot create 2,000 of concepts or 3,000 or 4. There will be no sense in doing this. So at later stages we become more focused or more selective, and that's why the later stages are called focused coding or selective coding. And in these stages we use concepts we have already created, but we refine them. Sometimes we delete them and create new concepts, of course, but we are more focused. And at these stages our research questions become more focused. In the process of analysis, we start to create higher order categories. And we merge individual codes or the low abstraction concepts into more abstract concepts. And the method of doing this is called constant comparative method, another strange concept in grounded theory. But it's a very natural process. We just take each concept and compare it with each another to find out whether they really are different in the conceptual sense or not. If they should be merged because they basically speak about the same, or they should be kept as separate concepts. So we do a sort of classification or categorization. And there is an example, again from Jan's study, so I switch to him.
Yes, and this is again from the transcript of the interview that you have in front of you. The first meaning unit is you know already. The therapist said it was like in the garden, and she got frustrated and then helpless. Nothing matters, nothing works, and you saw that I coded it as frustration, and then in other interview interview with other therapist, there was another piece of text which I also coded frustration, and these other quotation was I simply feel kind of angriness. I'm really angry at them. The depressive clients. The immobility, the inertness, it makes me angry. It is as if I call into a black hole. Yeah, so this is another quotation, but it got the same label. I named it, I coded it as frustration. So these two codes merged into one concept of frustration.
Or maybe it seems that you actually coded it in a bit different way. The code is angriness and frustration, but later you discovered that it may be subsumed under frustration. Yeah, so this is how we created, and this goes on and on, sometimes forever. This is an example. It's in Czech, but Jan will translate it.
Yeah. Here you can see how the codes merged. On the left side, on the right side, on your as you see it on the right side, you can see here is aggression, here's angriness, irritation, frustration, and
impatience. Yes.
Impatience. Yes, and all these codes merged together into one category, which is called unbearable. Yeah, and then on the other side, there's alienation, withdrawal, awkward. I can understand. It's awkward or something like that. And I have no compassion. I cannot feel together with the client. This is example of the in vivo code. Like I use the expression the therapist used. I have no compassion. And all these codes merged together to a category which was also named in vivo code. It means two different worlds. So you can see this group of codes merged into two different codes category, and these codes merged to unbearable category. And these two categories merged together into a higher category, which is called how is the translation? Distancing.
Yes.
Distancing from the client, like making distance from the client's experience. Oh yes, sorry. Did you hear anything from? Yeah, sorry. I will.
It seems that we are becoming really stupid in front of these microphones, and our English gets very bad. This slide is an output from the Atlas software, so this is what it looks like. This is why we did not translate it, but just wanted to show you what it looks like. We would like to stop here now and ask you to take the handouts if you have them, and just to read through the transcript. And yes, it's on one side of the handout, the transcript. And please just read through it to get into the context of the interview. This transcript, I just say a few sentences and then you can begin. This transcript describes one research event which was analyzed, and we have highlighted 2 parts of the transcript, which are in bigger letters here. And after you read the transcript, we would like you to focus on these 2 parts and try to conceptualize it, assign some code. You can do it in couples or in groups if you wish to. And
yeah, so just don't code the whole document, just read the whole one and then code these 2 parts that are indicated there. And you do the same procedure as we showed to us. Just make code and then make comment. What do you think about it, the concepts that you develop?
One of my colleagues asked me not to bother you with exercises, so please don't feel bothered by our exercise, and if you don't like to do it, please don't do it. Feel free. Our idea is to give you some 15 minutes and then to have a break. And after the break, Jan will take over and he will present his research. I will sometimes pop up to say something clever, but he will be the main speaker. And we can discuss your notes in the course of the second part, because Jan will refer to those 2 examples. Okay?
So it means that you have 15 minutes for working with the transcript and discussing it and coding and analyzing, and it's 35 now, so we have 10 until 50 to 50. Then you have 10 minutes break, and we meet here together at 3 o'clock.